Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast. Powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. With Philip Nothard and Curtis Hutchinson, bringing you all the chatter that matters.
Well, you know what, Philip? It's the middle of August and there's absolutely no sign of the season kicking in because...
Everyone's meant to be on holiday.
Yeah. But there's so much news going on.
There is so
much. Yeah. I mean, there is absolutely no shortage of news stories to talk about, as we'll discover over the course of this episode.
There is, yeah. And this week, I know we've had for the last couple of weeks, we've had a couple of sort of special Saturday shows, haven't we? So we are sticking to the headlines this week. So hopefully it'll be a little bit shorter. We'll try keeping the headlines quite tight and focused this week because... conscious that for the last couple of Saturdays you've had nearly an hour's worth of me and Curtis. Well, not really an hour's worth of me and you, is it? Because we were only on half of the podcast in the main. But we've had a couple of big shows, haven't we?
We have, yes. And as a result of those big shows, what we decided to do during the week was present them as standalone episodes. So the first one that we released at the beginning of the week was with the interview we did with John Butler from the law firm Geldards. And he's the legal counsel for the Vehicle and Remarketing Association, very high profile commentator on automotive, what's happening in automotive. And we caught up with him about the ramifications of the Supreme Court ruling on finance sales and claims. So that's actually now available as a standalone pod, and that's in your podcast feed now.
Yeah, and the other one that we released on Thursday morning of this week was the interview with Nick Thomas, who's the UK MD for Changan, which is the new Chinese manufacturer that makes its debut in the UK in September. And that created a lot of interest, obviously, with the detail that Nick shared of their go-to-market plans, the pre-launch plans that the brand are doing with there. So that is on your podcast feed as well. That was from the week before on the second half of the Saturday show. So again, we shared that as a standalone, so you can have a listen to that in your podcast feed from Thursday morning. It was shared this week.
And this week we're joined in the second half by our mental wealth guru, Stephen Whitton, for his latest Menable moment. And this month's theme is Everyone's Safe Always, and how one of the keys to gaining and retaining good staff in the car retailing sector is that they feel safe in their working environment. So do stay tuned for that.
You're listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors.
Headlines this week come from Car Dealer AM, Auto Sunday, Which, and The Times. Now, this week we've got updates on three big stories that we've been following closely over recent weeks. So in the first half of the show, we'll have the latest news on the electric car grant, the list of Band 2 cars qualifying for £1,500 grants is growing, but there's still no EVs qualifying for the higher rate, Band 1 at £3,700. And that's causing some buyers to delay their purchases, according to some reports. The House of Lords has stepped into the FCA's redress scheme following this month's Supreme Court judgment, questioning why it's looking at cases dating back to 2007, while the FCA hints that its redress scheme may not be restricted to discretionary commission arrangements. So still lots to play out in that particular story. And then the third update we've got is the mega Citroen airbag recall rumbles on as an additional 72,000 Stellantis brand cars are recalled over a potential fire risk. Then in the second half, we'll look at the welcome surge in used car sales in Q2, and we'll wrap up with dealers selling used EVs call for a battery health check scheme.
So, as Curtis has said there, we'll head over to the first one. We've got busy, big headlines there, Curtis, just gone through. But as Curtis said, the car dealer, that they've jumped straight on the back of the latest figures from the government around the qualification of the ECG, the electric car grant. That government defends its electric car grant after it fails to move out of first gear. A month after the launch, there's still no electric cars, as Curtis said, that are available with the full 3,750 discount grant, and that the Department for Transport has announced that just 17 cars can benefit from the reduced £1,500 discount tier, and that car dealers and industry leaders say that the scheme is too complicated and is taking too long to sign off, and that consumers, the customers, the buyers are actually delaying or suspending their purchases as they wait to hear what EVs are actually included in the scheme. So I think from our interview there previously with Steve Young from ICDP, I think what he related is actually playing out now, isn't it? That it seems a bit more of a headline statement grabbing rather than an actual tool to actually do something for the EV sector.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's all a bit of a mess, really. As this story is written by James Baggett at Car Dealer, goes into a lot of detail. It's a great story. I do urge you to go over to the Car Dealer website to check it out. But as you say, just 17 models now qualify for the band 2 rate at £1,500, and that covers just 4 brands. And this is now this is a month, a full month now after the announcement of the scheme. And this story, it does go into some of the comments coming from the industry, and it also highlights that at the moment there's no cars at all from the Volkswagen Group, BMW or Mercedes on that official list that's put out by the Department for Transport, which it's an online list which is updated every day. And as we record this, there are just 17 qualifying cars, as you mentioned. Now, within the story, they quote a couple of dealers, including friend of the pods, Peter Smythe, director of Swansway Group, who called the rollout of the scheme shambolic, sort of summed it up in one word, saying that this scheme should have been far more simpler than this government's bureaucratic mess that we're now in. And there's another quote from Neil McHugh, who runs the South Coast-based Snows Group, who said that we saw customers holding off buying electric cars in July, and we're seeing it again in August. They're asking for their £3,750 discount, and we can't give it to them. And he's really saying that the scheme should have been presented in a more straightforward way, and he does question why it was linked to the emissions incurred during the manufacturing process. It could have been a lot simpler, and I do totally agree with him on that one.
I mean, it is crazy, isn't it? And this the reports are that this is extended into the fleet and rental market as well, and others, because everybody's one, it's taken so long just to get these first vehicles, as you say, 17 there that are eligible for tier 2, but they're saying it will be continued to be updated, which means there's still vehicles going through the process. So at what point does it end? So someone go, actually, okay, we know where we're at, we know which cars are eligible, we know which ones aren't eligible. Let's try and work forward from there. But yeah, I think it's done more harm than actual good with this, unfortunately. So as you say, not so happy sentiment across the network there is for this, and this they are frustrated with the details of the scheme, that they weren't hammered out behind the scenes first, and that they should have been letting car makers announce the eligible cars themselves from day one. And obviously, we talked about it, didn't we, last week on the podcast, that there are other schemes that other manufacturers are coming out with to try and counter this, to try and give the consumer something. And even into the used market, we've got Car Supermarket that's offering their own scheme, but that's kind of not what this was intended for, was it?
No, if there'd been a proper consultation behind the scenes, certainly between the Department for Transport and the SMMT, maybe the NFDA, then a scheme could have been thrashed out and launched, as you say, on day one. Then everyone would have known where they stood. From customers to buyers from customers to dealers to the car manufacturers. Whereas at the moment it's a mess because it's ad hoc. Cars are being added to the list, as you say. Other schemes are being launched, and nothing qualifies for the band one. And there's some speculation, or certainly reports, that the Nissan Micra, the all new Nissan Micra, might qualify for that £3,750, but it's not going to come to market until mid or back end of next year. So that's still a long way off, although Nissan is very confident it will qualify for the full rate.
Yeah, it's a long way off before that has any impact on the sector, isn't it, before that car comes. But as I say there, the list is available, and we'll put a link to the government website where you can get the updates on the vehicles as they become available or not become available, as the case seems to be. But we'll put that on the newsletter on Monday morning as usual, so you can access it and keep an eye on it from there.
And second story, it's another update, and this is on the Supreme Court judgment on the whole car finance claims debate that's been really sort of dragging on for what seems like months and months. And the judgment, we heard about it at the beginning of the month, and this is quite an interesting follow-up because it's come from the House of Lords, and the story is reported in the Times under the headline "Shortened Time Limit for Car Finance Claims, Peers Tell Regulator." So this is the House of Lords Financial Services Regulation Committee. It's actually written to the Financial Conduct Authority, asking it to justify why claims, these potential claims, are going back as far as 2007. And the committee suggests that claims should only be eligible in respect of car finance where the contract has expired within the last 6 years. And the proposal could dramatically reduce the number of valid claims, should that go through. But this 2007, I mean, it was explained to us by Jonathan Butler, because this is all part of the ombudsman scheme, isn't it? It's
Yes.
The FCA, in its defence, said the start point should be 2007 because this was consistent with consumers' rights to take complaints to the Financial Ombudsman Service. So that's how we've got the date. But the House of Lords are really questioning it and whether or not it should be applied more to the Consumer Credit Act.
Yeah, and that's where they are talking there. That it said that obviously it might be 6 years, citing the precedent of a case brought to the Supreme Court in 2023 involving the consumer, as you say, that Consumer Credit Act. So there is a lot going on with this now, isn't there? And obviously there's there's a further paragraph in consumer hopes of a payout bonanza. And I think, was it Jonathan that said these book their cruises
Yes, yeah.
of a 35 billion or more have already been dashed by the Supreme Court ruling, which found that the dealers did not owe the fiduciary duty to customers, significantly narrowing that potential liability. So, yeah, I mean, there's now this 6-week window of consultation. So it's going to get very interesting to see what comes at the end of that consultation period and what the actions will finally be, particularly when you've now got these the House of Lords now getting heavily involved with the FCA, and obviously coming at it from a slightly different angle as to the pragmatic approach to this and why they're doing it.
Yeah, and there's a very telling quote from Lord Forsyth, who's the chairman of the committee. And so what happened was he wrote a letter to the FCA after it announced the redress scheme, and he's asking, what legal advice has the FCA taken on this point? What legal grounding underpins the FCA's proposed time frame? So yeah, there's some unanswered questions there, and this one will rumble on, I predict, Phil.
I think it may well do, yes. Now, we're going to head over to Auto Sunday now, and the story in there is that the FCA hints of non-DCA redress scope. And this is that consultation on the redress scheme for the finance claims will cover non-discretionary arrangements, according to the FCA's head of consumer finance, Mark Burns. That he was speaking at the recent NFDA's Future of Finance conference last week, and that Burns said that the FCA would consult on which non-DCA products should be included. So again, there's a lot to unpick here, isn't there?
Yeah, certainly, yeah, because he adds that any redress scheme will need to provide certainty as well as being easy, so that consumers don't need to use claims management firms, which again is another point that Jonathan Butler from Geldar's picked up in his interview. And he goes on to say, we as a regulator have three strategic objectives. One is to get the appropriate degree of protection for consumers. Another one is to create effective market competition. And the third is to ensure market integrity. We will need to balance those as part of the scheme. Hence, they're looking at non-DCA products as well. And again, we'll be hearing a lot more on this one.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of a statement there. We are keen that customers get redress in a timely manner. It's going to be interesting, that one. But anyway, you need to listen to the full interview, as Curtis said at the start, with John Butler from Geldar's that we published on Monday morning, to get his take on what we might call a timely manner on this one. But we'll keep you updated as that comes.
And the third of our update stories is from Car Dealer, and it does follow up from what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago about the Citroen recall. And the headline from Car Dealer is Stellantis recall woes move up a gear. Now 72,000 cars called back over potential fire risk. So what's happened here is that Stellantis has confirmed that 28 models from its Alfa, Citroen, DS, Fiat, Jeep, Peugeot and Vauxhall brands are affected by this recall, which is voluntary. And what it's down to is a high-pressure fuel pipe, which with loose nuts potentially leading to leaks, and in worst-case scenarios, a fire in the engine bay. And the recall was actually prompted by 11 reported cases of cars catching fire in France. And a Stellantis spokesperson has said, having customer safety and satisfaction at the core of its values, we are voluntarily recalling an estimated 72,000 cars in the UK due to a potential issue with the high-pressure fuel pipe. Now, this on its own would be a fairly major story. It comes on the back of this major stop drive recall that was issued in June on Citroen C3 and DS3 models, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah. I mean, that was an airbag issue, which was a cease driving, and as we covered on previous calls, I mean that created a significant blockage in the Citroen network, and then they ended up calling on the Peugeot network to support the work on that. But they were on older models, weren't they? They were on earlier models on those. But I think in this story, it does cite that this recall is actually between 2023 and 2025 on the models that Curtis ran through earlier. So yes, this isn't a cease driving. It is a quite significant recall with 72,000 vehicles, but actually it probably hits that franchise dealer network a lot more than the other recall from a vehicle sales perspective, because it is on those newer vehicles rather than those older vehicles. So again, you feel for those dealers at the minute that are getting clogged up with these recalls. I mean, obviously it's filling the workshop with plenty of hours of work, but it depends if they're getting the return on that work compared to retail work on a per hour basis. So yeah, it's not great news, is it?
It's not great news, and it's been compounded by Which, who have written to the government, and it's been pretty damning on Stellantis in relation to the Citroen C3 and DS recall. And in a report on the Which website, that they go into details on this, saying that we believe Stellantis has demonstrated a deliberate lack of public clarity on compensation, and that lack of communication between head office and dealerships is causing delays that have put owners into financial difficulties. So the argument here, Which obviously coming from a consumer perspective, is saying that, okay, if this cease driving notice has been issued on these particular models, then the owners need to be compensated because they bought the cars in good faith and they can't drive them safely at the moment, and also their insurance will be invalidated. So they've sent this letter to the government, and again, this is going to rumble on, and it's certainly been compounded by this additional recall that on the potential fire risk.
Yeah, and again, we'll put the link to the Which article in the newsletter on Monday. But the final bit on this is that what Which has asked Stellantis and the government, and they've laid out a few sort of paragraphs that they've included in the letter there, saying that they want to confirm a formal compensation scheme, address helpline issues that they've been highlighted from consumers, and provide a clear garage solution. So they've called on that they need this clarity, because there is quoting here from a C3 owner saying, "I just want Citroen to be accountable for how they treated this situation." So I think everyone's clear that these things happen. It's the way these things do occur. But I think the big complaint from Which is the way it's been resolved and handled from the Stellantis brand. But again, we'll keep an eye on this one as it rumbles through. But we'll be back in a second half of with the rest of this week's news after this month's Menable Moments.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on Motor Trade Radio, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines from across the media, available on demand, wherever you are, and on your podcast feed. Next up is our latest Menable moment, looking at mental wealth and well-being awareness and best practice in the automotive sector. With me, Stephen Whitton. Hi everyone, it's Menable Moments time again. Hope you're well, and I hope you're enjoying the beautiful weather that many parts of the UK are enjoying right now. I want to ask you a bit of a question, and it involves a number of words. And I'd like you to stop and think for a minute. In your career in automotive, have you felt any of the following? Have you felt supported? Have you felt valued? Have you felt seen? Have you felt that you could be curious? And have you felt the opportunity to grow? Put all of that together. Have you felt that you've worked in an environment that encourages you to be fearless? And what I mean by fearless is able to challenge without the fear of negative consequences. Now, why am I asking you all of that, you might wonder? And that is because every so often we sit down and we, as a business, Menable that is, take a look at our purpose and what is it that we are doing and what are we in service of. And most recently, in a bit of a review, all of the light bulbs went on at the same time. And due to the way things are moving, the way things are evolving, and the continual feedback that we get from different people, and the work that we've done with organisations on helping them with their purpose, it became very clear to us, and the guy in that car with the horn going past, apologies for that, it became very clear to us that our purpose boils down to, quite simply, everyone should feel safe in automotive. Now, of course, I'm talking about psychological safety. We put a lot of time and effort and money and resources into physical safety in our industry for obvious reasons, but this is also about psychological safety. Am I safe to be myself, be the truest, most authentic version of me possible without any fear of retribution or negative consequences? Am I able to do all of that? And have I been able to do that throughout my career in the automotive industry? And I've got to be honest, when I ask myself the question as bluntly as that, the answer is quite a resounding no, not always. Now, I won't go into the reasons for why that is, but I think our opportunity and what we at Menable are wanting to do is to work across the industry even more at helping everyone to be safe always in our industry. That will ultimately result in us gaining and retaining fabulous people, because they need to know that they're in an environment where their well-being is high on the agenda. Now, one of the things that you as a business, if you're a leader, can do to move that on as a bit of an actionable takeaway, if you like, is to put in place mental wealth champions. Now, maybe you've already got mental health first aiders, and that's great because those guys and girls have stepped up and have offered themselves in service of looking out for their colleagues who might need help and support. That's amazing. Totally encourage that. But let's go a step further and build in mental wealth champions. People who can keep an eye on what's going on in the well-being of the people in your team. Like I've said many times, people perform well when they're feeling good about themselves. Now, to help with that, we would like to work with your mental wealth champions. And so we're offering a mental wealth pioneer membership. It's £1,000 a year, per year, that's all. And if you mention Motor Trade Radio podcast when you contact me about it, I'm sure we can offer up a little bit of a reduction in that as well, because we are so committed to making sure everyone is safe in automotive, but we can't do it without there being people on the ground keeping an eye on this and championing that cause. So mental wealth champions is what we need, and we need you as a business to commit to becoming mental wealth pioneers. So if you're interested in that, you want to join us and come on board, give us a shout. Let's get you involved. We've already got a couple of companies signing up over the next few weeks, and the idea being is that we will meet regularly to talk about what's going on out there and share even more best practice with people who can properly help you to make a business change and a business impact. So that's what we're aiming to do over the next period of time, whatever it is, until we relook at our purpose again and look at its purpose, fitness for purpose. But right now, it's everyone safe always. If you would like some help, please get in touch, stephen.whitton@menable.org. And as always, thanks again for listening, and thanks Phil and Curtis for giving us the chance to promote this important subject. Take it easy and enjoy yourselves in the weather.
Well, it's another great initiative from Stephen there, and I know he's very excited about it, and he's keen to share his thoughts and how he can help dealer groups. So, as he says, do reach out to him, do get in touch, and I do like the term psychologically safe, because that really does encapsulate what this initiative is all about.
Yeah, and he's trying to get that culture into. That's the thing with this. He's trying to get it as he's not get the culture into the organisations of this mental health and well-being. And if for any reason you can't find Stephen on the social media channels, particularly on LinkedIn, then drop me or Curtis a note, and we'll certainly make the relevant introduction to Stephen. And he's there to help. And I know from some of the organisations that he's been involved with, they've been a fantastic, massive success. If you just look at some of his social activities with some of the companies he's been involved with, so do get in touch and do get involved. It's a serious opportunity to change the culture within the automotive sector. But getting back to the headlines, the final couple of stories of this week, and as we last week, at the very end of last week, before we as we recorded, was the announcement of the second quarter used car transactions from the SMMT there. And the headline on AM Online is that EVs drive used car market to hit 4 million milestone in the strongest Q2 since 2021, saying that the used car market surged in the second quarter with transactions climbing 1.7% to 1,996,116. 116. The sector best Q2 performance in 4 years, according to the SMMT. So, again, great performance, citing that the growth of EVs within that is much to do with the activity. Some may question that, but I'm not saying I would. I'm just saying some commentators, Curtis, might question that. I've seen some source of stuff about the question of it, but because there's a lot of EVs in the market that are a year or more old that have got 0 mileage on them still. But just saying. But yeah, there's a lot of activity.
Really, that comes as a surprise, Phil.
But no, on a serious matter, I mean, it is the 10th consecutive quarter of growth with sales for the first half of this year, hitting that 4 million mark, which would account for 2.2% growth year on year for the first half of the year, and saying that it's putting the market within 1% of the pre-pandemic level. So I think testament to the sector, however you slice it up, it's a growth, however you look at it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's good positive news, this. And as you say, it's just over 4 million units in the year to date, the first 6 months of the year, and just shy of 2 million in the Q2. And it is worth looking at the different fuel segments. So petrol cars remains the top sellers naturally, and that they were up 1.5% to 1.1 million units. So that's over half of the used cars sold in that period, while diesels were down 4.3%. But as you say, the standout growth really came from the electrified segment. So that's pure electric and hybrid. So looking at those battery electric vehicles, transactions were actually up 40% to just shy of 69,000 units, taking a 3.4% market share. So coming from a low base, but there's incremental growth that we're seeing now. Hybrids were up by 28%, and plug-in hybrids were up 10%. So some increases there across the three main electrified fuel types.
Yeah, and I like that ending there, that appeal to a greener second-hand options for that hybrid and plug-in hybrid, because I think more and more now I'm talking more about new energy vehicles, which incorporates those hybrid technologies, be it plug-in or otherwise. And I think this is kind of reflecting that it's positive. You can't get away from the numbers, can you, Curtis? It's positive that there has been more full battery electric vehicles transacted in the first half of this year. It's positive growth. We know that they are coming into the market, into the used vehicle park in volumes, but it's good that they are now starting to transact through that used vehicle market. So I think great positive results there for the first half, hitting that 4 million, which gives a little bit of optimism. I know we're heading into a potentially low volume quarters in Q3 and Q4, but it's optimistic that we'll get towards that 7.6 million 7.7 million used cars for this year, which is a positive growth for the sector.
Yeah, because I mean, we're old enough to remember when the used car markets typically accounted for 8 million units. So, if at the current run rate, we're not that far behind. I mean, I don't think we're going to be seeing 8 million for some time now, or if ever again. But it's tracking at a pretty good rate.
It is, yeah. I mean, my baseline for the year is 7.7 million. So I think that is a good result. I think we will see, even with a potential slowdown in Q3, Q4, just by dynamics of the market, we'll still be ahead of last year and ahead of pre-pandemic averages in reality. So I think it's optimistic. However, you look at how those vehicles are made up and how they are transacted, but I think it is positive growth.
And we'll stay with used EVs for the final story of this week. And heading over to Motor Trade News, and the headline there is Used EV Sector Needs Battery Health Check Scheme, says dealers. So this is 78% of dealers believe battery health is an essential consideration for most EV buyers. So 9 out of 10 dealers, so 90%, say the used electric vehicle sector needs an industry-wide scheme for battery health tests. And this is according to the August 2025 Startline Used Car Tracker. And we do reference the Startline Used Car Tracker on a regular basis. It is a good piece of research that's conducted every month, and it really does pinpoint some of the trends that are happening in the used car sector. And the tracker goes on to show that 78% believe battery health is an essential consideration for most EV buyers.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think there is a lot of activity around this at the minute, and there is still a lot of dealers that don't have some kind of solution for doing any of the tests either. And we did that, if you remember, Curtis. We had that supplier special with Oliver Philpott recently from Generational, who is and them amongst others, trying to get the sector to think differently around battery electric vehicles, particularly in the used market, getting involved with the state of health certification and thinking about how it is marketed to consumers. Because if they know that consumers want it, but again, and we fed this back to the government, that there could have been more with the ECG, the electric car grant, that might have been a little bit better focused on used marketplace to alleviate some of these challenges. But again, I mean, it's great insight there from Startline in terms of what the dealers are thinking and saying about that battery health for used vehicles.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a good quote there from Paul Burgess, CEO of Startline Motor Finance, who says, dealers are obviously at the sharp end of selling used cars, and essentially this data is telling us the overwhelming majority believe the sector needs some form of formal battery health check scheme, with more than 3 out of 4 thinking battery health is a key consideration for buyers. So this really does sum up what the industry call is for an industry-wide accreditation scheme, and it's something that we've covered a number of times on the podcast, and I suspect we will be returning to this again.
We will, for definite, and I suspect we'll be returning to the many of the headlines that we've called out today. So hopefully we've kind of managed to touch base on some of the big topics this week, obviously with the ongoing challenges and sentiment of the ECG, the electric car grant, and or the lack of it, should we say, in that. Obviously with the House of Lords now getting involved, and with the FCA following the Supreme Court judgment there, the woes and challenges obviously around the Citroen recall for Stellantis now across the network. So again, we'll keep ahead of all this, but quite a few headlines there we've managed to get through this morning, Curtis.
Yeah, and as I said at the top of the show, no sign of the silly season kicking in. So, but that's all for now. So many thanks for joining us on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. Until next week, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Thank you for listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. We'll be sharing all the URLs from this week's headlines on Monday morning. To make sure you receive them, just subscribe to the free newsletter on our LinkedIn page. Just search Motor Trade Radio Podcast.